In the early weeks of the pandemic, my mental health was slowly getting worse. Not being able to leave was obviously hard. That's when I think everybody started drinking more. That's when I started drinking more. That started a downward spiral.
It was super busy. I would sometimes go to work, drive an hour, go to work, come home, drive an hour, and then pick up my daughter and take her to dance class. And then my days were just so full from top to bottom. And I think that's very common for a lot of parents, a lot of moms. So when the pandemic did make everything slow down, there was relief. Honestly, I felt a sense of relief.
At first, I wasn't really affected at all. I was just still working. I still had a bit of a social outlet. I wasn't, that stressed out about it.
It didn't really affect me that much in the beginning. It was more like over time it started to.
Personally, the biggest factor of the pandemic in particular, how it affected me.
What affected my mental health the most?
The pandemic, not in a good way, allowed me to isolate myself more.
I felt pretty isolated.
The isolation.
The first curve was the pandemic itself, but I'm concerned that the second curve that we need to flatten is the consequences of the pandemic in terms of the psychiatric fallout.
At the beginning of the pandemic, my mental health wasn't bad. It just didn't feel real. Really. Like, I was working in the beginning of March, and then I kept telling myself, this isn't actually going to happen. Like, really, come on.
It was less go to work and then spend the rest of my day doing whatever I wanted, like going out and stuff, and more sit at home until you have to go to work again.
I have depression, and it got worse. It had bad days, but not terrible. It was just a lot of sleeping.
I wasn't taking care of myself. Really, I was just kind of sitting around anxiously, checking my social media, seeing what was going on, stuff like that.
I could kind of tell my mental health was degrading a little bit because I couldn't go out and do the same things that I had been doing pretty regularly for years at that point,
I was in a really toxic relationship at that time, so that didn't help either. I just wanted to sleep until it was over.
So as the pandemic wore on, we had 5 people living in this home, and it's not a super duper large home, so it was chaotic.
All the on-call workers got furloughed, and to this day, they still haven't brought us back. They never told me about it. But when that happened, I kind of just got home and was like, what am I going to do now?
Okay, so the winter of 2020 definitely was a bad part of the pandemic for our country. And I think it affected my mental health just even more. In the wintertime, we're more isolated from each other in general. On a yearly basis, I always feel like, oh, it's spring, everybody's coming back out of their little hibernation. So we had that normalness, and then all of the restrictions on top of it. And then just the sad news that would come a lot, it was frustrating.
I struggled, and I ended up going to a hospital for my mental health. I was inpatient for a little bit.
Winter of 2020 really kicked me. I mean, I tripped and fell down the stairs during the summer, and then as soon as I got to the bottom, winter was just and it just kicked you, while you're down.
It didn't really affect me mentally that much. It was just frustrating at times because people weren't wanting to wear their masks, and it was just come on, people. But mentally I was pretty okay.
The reasons I think I was struggling during the winter was battling borderline personality disorder, and my days consisted of drinking more heavily for sure. So I was struggling with alcoholism, and I'm now recovering from alcoholism, and I am at this day 14 days sober.
I would end up trying to just, calm myself down or try to think about something that wasn't the pandemic or that wasn't classes. I was not in a good state in general, like mentally or physically.
I lost my great grandma to COVID-19. It was really sad because we weren't, obviously because she died, but it was scary because we weren't sure if we were able to have a funeral and if people were going to be able to go.
I did lose one family member, close family member, to COVID that I know of, and she is my aunt through marriage, so my husband's Aunt Sue. They had lived in North Carolina for the past few years, but we tried to keep in touch as well as we could, and yeah, we lost Sue to COVID.
When the vaccines started rolling out during the spring, that lifted weight off of my shoulders a little bit.
It's gotten better for sure because it makes things more hopeful that it will go back to normal a little bit more.
I feel like we're starting to kind of regain our footing here.
Yeah, so things are looking better with the pandemic, and that has helped. Mental health, of course.
Today, I would say my mental health has gotten better. Still struggle here and there. It's a work in progress, but I'm getting there.
I think my mental health through the pandemic has stayed relatively the same. Being back and having a regular routine has helped a lot.
My mental health has easily gotten worse. The pandemic hitting really kind of showed me how much I rely on the company of others.
Honestly, I don't think I could say if it's better or worse. It's changed. There's been different challenges throughout the pandemic, and it's been difficult, for sure.
For somebody struggling with mental health, try not to focus too much on what's going to be in the future or what's in the near future, but focus on what you need to do right now to get through whatever you're going through.
I would reach out to your friends or your family.
I'm a big advocate of mental health and getting therapy and things like that. It can be a journey to find the right person and the right relationship, so it's not always easy, but I think I'm a big advocate of that.
The first step to getting help is always hard, but once you make it and you get support, it really does feel much better.